Have you ever wondered what happens when curiosity turns into obsession? When watching becomes interfering, and when the line between observer and participant completely disappears? What would you do if you could see everything happening in the apartment across from yours? Every intimate moment, every secret, every lie. Would you just watch or would you get involved? This film explores exactly that dangerous territory, taking viewers on a psychological journey where nothing is quite what it seems and every action has devastating consequences. The story centers on Pippa, a young woman who works as a trainee optometrist, and her boyfriend Thomas, who have just moved into their first apartment together in Montreal. The excitement of their new life together takes an unexpected turn when they discover their windows offer a direct view into the apartment across the street, where they can see a photographer's studio and the people living there. What begins as an accidental glimpse quickly transforms into something they cannot look away from, especially when they witness the couple across the street engaging in intimate activities. Pippa and Thomas playfully assign their neighbors fictional names, calling them Margot and Brent, treating the situation like harmless entertainment. As Pippa receives a bird feeder as a housewarming gift from her boss at the optical store where she works, she also purchases binoculars, ostensibly for bird watching, but really to get a better view of their neighbors. The couple finds themselves increasingly drawn into observing the lives unfolding across the street, noticing that the man they call Brent frequently brings different models to the apartment for photo shoots that invariably turn intimate, all while the woman they call Margot is away. This pattern of behavior fascinates Pippa, who becomes more invested in understanding what is happening in that relationship, while she and Thomas incorporate these observations into their own relationship in various ways. The voyeurism escalates when Pippa expresses a desire to hear what their neighbors are actually saying, not just watch them. Thomas reveals he knows a technique using a laser pointer that can pick up audio from a room if there is a reflective surface to bounce the signal back. When the couple across the street throws a Halloween costume party, Pippa and Thomas see their opportunity and sneak into the event disguised as guests. During the party, Pippa strategically plants a small mirror in the apartment, which later allows them to use the laser technique to eavesdrop on private conversations. What they hear disturbs them deeply as Margot confronts Brent about his unfaithfulness. But instead of admitting anything, he becomes aggressive and dismisses her concerns, making her doubt her own perceptions. The situation becomes more complicated when the woman Pippa has been calling Margot walks into the optical store where Pippa works, revealing herself to be a real person named Julia. Pippa conducts an eye examination for Julia and recommends new glasses, all while knowing intimate details about Julia's life that she should not possess. Julia, friendly and trusting, invites Pippa to spend time together outside of the professional setting. Pippa finds herself torn between wanting to warn Julia about her husband's behavior and Thomas's insistence that they need to stop interfering in their neighbors' lives. Despite Thomas's warnings, Pippa meets Julia at a spa where Julia opens up about her life, revealing that her husband is named Sebastian, though everyone calls him Seb, and that he is a well-known photographer. Julia also shares that she used to be a model herself, but left that career behind because she did not want her self-worth determined by such a demanding and judgmental industry. Pippa's surveillance continues and intensifies when she witnesses Seb engaging in activities with multiple people at once, observing him disposing of evidence afterward. Her tech-savvy nature leads her to discover that she can access Julia and Seb's wireless printer remotely, and she uses this access to send an anonymous message to Julia exposing Seb's infidelities, even mentioning specific details like the discarded item as proof. Thomas is furious when he realizes how deeply Pippa has embedded herself in their neighbors' lives, confronting her about the unhealthy obsession and the potential consequences of her meddling. The next morning, Pippa apologizes and promises Thomas she will stop watching the neighbors, agreeing that she has gone too far. However, their agreement to stop becomes meaningless when they look across the street and witness a horrifying scene as Seb discovers Julia's body in the bathroom, apparently having harmed herself fatally. Thomas immediately blames Pippa for this tragic outcome, believing that her anonymous message pushed Julia over the edge. Unable to cope with the guilt and the role they played, Thomas breaks up with Pippa and leaves the apartment. Pippa is devastated by both the apparent loss of Julia and the end of her relationship with Thomas, yet she cannot stop herself from continuing to watch Seb. One evening, Still consumed by everything that has happened, Pippa follows Seb to a nearby pub where he surprisingly approaches and sits next to her. They engage in conversation, and Seb persuades her to come back to his apartment so he can photograph her. During this session, Seb convinces Pippa to pose without clothing, and the photo shoot leads to them becoming intimate. Meanwhile, Thomas returns to the apartment seeking reconciliation and finds a drink in the refrigerator that Pippa had left. He drinks some of it and pours the remainder into Pippa's bird feeder outside before looking across the street and seeing Pippa with Seb. The next morning brings another shock when Pippa returns home to discover Thomas has apparently ended his own life in their apartment. Devastated and grieving, Pippa and her friend Ari from work attend an art exhibition that Seb has been promoting. When they arrive, they receive the shock of their lives as the exhibition turns out to be a collaboration between Seb and Julia, who is very much alive. The exhibition reveals that Pippa and Thomas were the actual subjects all along, their every move documented and photographed without their knowledge. Seb and Julia explain that they own the apartment Pippa and Thomas had been renting, and buried in the lease agreement was a clause granting consent to be photographed. They had known they were being watched the entire time and had orchestrated everything as an elaborate art project exploring voyeurism and observation. Pippa storms out of the exhibition in distress and rage, eventually discovering Seb's actual studio space located directly above her apartment. In her anger, she destroys the studio and its contents. As she prepares to move out of the apartment that has brought so much tragedy, she notices something disturbing near her window, where the bird feeder hangs. Several deceased birds lying on a grate below it. This discovery triggers a realization in her mind. The birds passed from something in the feeder. Thomas had poured the drink into that feeder, which means Thomas did not end his own life, but was harmed by something in that drink. After Seb and Julia give an interview promoting their controversial exhibition, they return home to find a congratulatory bottle of wine waiting at their door. Pleased with their success, they open the wine and begin drinking it. As they consume the wine, they receive a message on their printer from Pippa stating that she knows they are responsible for what happened to Thomas. Looking up, they spot Pippa watching them from the rooftop, and they rush out to chase her. Pippa leads them to the optical store where she works, luring them inside. There, she confronts them with her theory that while she was with Seb that night, Julia had entered her apartment, poisoned Thomas's drink, and then staged the scene to look self-inflicted. Pippa then reveals her own plan, that she had spiked the congratulatory wine they just consumed, and the substance is now taking effect. As Seb and Julia collapse from the effects, Pippa positions them under the LASIK eye surgery machine available at the optical store. Using her knowledge from working there, she activates the laser to permanently damage their corneas, ensuring they will never see again. The film closes with a new couple, two men, moving into the apartment that Pippa and Thomas once occupied. These new tenants discover the same view into Seb and Julia's apartment across the street and begin observing them, not knowing the full story. Seb and Julia, now both without sight, continue their lives in that apartment, completely unaware that they are still being watched just as they once watched others. From the rooftop one final time, Pippa observes the apartment and the cycle beginning again before she leaves her binoculars behind and walks away, finally breaking free from the pattern of observation that destroyed so many lives.